Hello and welcome to Cheetah Coding. So I wanted to create a video to show you how easy it is to create responsive layouts in your apps. Sometimes you want different layouts in both portrait mode and landscape mode. So as you can see with the app that I have here, I created a very simple app that has a list view here and two buttons. The buttons don't do anything. So the focus of the video is just to get this looking a little bit better in the landscape mode. So as you can see here, if we turn to landscape, we have the same layout being shown here, two buttons, a title, and a list here. Okay. So eventually I want to have the text, buttons, and list looking better in this landscape view here. Okay. So let's go back to the app, and real quick, I will show you what we're doing. I have the theme here for the colors, and I have the stack screen with a responsive layout title here. In the home screen, I have container, title. So I created all these in styled components. I'll be showing you how to pass certain variables to your styled component too. So we have button container, cheetah button. If you look here, we have button container, cheetah button down here. Okay, we have our wrapper here for our container and text here too. Okay. So back to the home screen, we have cheetah button. So the button width is 1/3 of the screen width here for each button. And you can see here, I'm passing in the width, and then I am passing that into the actual styling for that component. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. If you don't know much about styled components, I did a video about it on my channel, and the link to that should be at the top of the screen now. So let's go back to the home again. So I have the list, which is a flat list. I'm adding some random languages here, and that's it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a new hook. So a hook is a great way for you to add more functionality to your app that you can import in and use in different classes. Okay, so first I'm going to create a new folder here and name it hooks. So in here, I want to create a new file, and I'm going to call it useorientation.js. Okay, so this will be our hook, and I always start the hooks with use just because that's the convention for the React library. Okay, and then I'm going to say export default use orientation, and then we're going to return. First, I'm going to create a use state hook, and this use state hook will listen for our dimension change. So as we switch from landscape to portrait and back and forth, then this use state hook will get updated. Okay, so let's create it. So I'm going to say constant, and I'm just going to call it screen info. And then I'm going to say set screen info. Okay, so that's our tuple here for the use state, and equals use state. Okay, and then here we're going to get the screen dimensions. So I'm going to say dimensions dot get, and then the keyword for this is screen. Okay, so there's screen and window for your dimensions that you can get. Okay, so this will get the screen dimensions. Okay, so let's go down here, and now I want to create a use effect hook. So I'm assuming already that you kind of already understand use state, use effect, and so on for hooks. But if you don't, feel free to ask questions in the comments. So I'm going to say use effect, and then return our data here. Let's do our constant when change. So this will be our callback when the orientation gets changed. So equals, and then we get back a result. I'll call it result. And then I'm going to set our state information here. So set screen info here. So set screen info, and then result. So the actual field will be screen.screen. So I'll explain more about what this is all doing after I'm finished, but so down here, now I'm going to add the event listener. So we can listen for different events in React, And this one will be dimensions dot add event listener. So this class dot add event listener. And then the event name is change. As you can see here, we have add event listener type change here. Okay. And we can use our handler for a window or a screen. And our handler is this function here, the onChange. Okay, so change, and then pass in our onChange callback. And then I want to do the return here for our use effect. So return a function, dimensions dot remove event listener. So we're adding it here, and then I want to remove it here and remove the same listener. Make sure these are the same here. And then I also pass in the onChange. Okay, so that's our use effect hook. So real quick to go over this, the use effect hook takes care of different lifecycle methods in your React app. So when our component is unmounted, we will remove the listener. When it's added, we will add the event listener here. And then the event callback here is this function. So when this event fires the change event, then we call this function here to set the screen info in our use state based on the result.screen. And when we set this screen info, our component will get rebuilt. Okay, and that's what we want. We want the actual component to get rebuilt when you turn the screen. So down here, to finish off our component, our hook, I should say, then I want to return whatever info we want to use for the hook. So I'm going to say return, and then here you can return whatever you want to. So if you just want to know whether, for example, like the height is bigger than the width, then you can return screen info. So that's from our use state here. You can say if that height is greater than screen info dot width, and that could be enough for you. But for this video, I want to return an object. And first I'm going to return the actual screen info itself. So I'm going to do a spread operator and say screen info, return whatever all this data is. So you will see what we get back from the result.screen here, but it's kind of a lot of information. And I'm just going to do a spread operator so we can see that in the log and see what we actually return. Okay. And then after this, I want to return the actual flag that we'll pay attention to, and that will be the is portrait. So I'm going to call it is portrait, and then there I'm going to actually do my condition saying screen info dot height is greater than screen info dot width. Okay, so it's pretty safe to say that if the height of the window or the screen is greater than the width, then we are in portrait mode. And that's all I really care about for this flag here. So that is actually the hard part of the video. Everything else is actually pretty easy because everything else just involves us actually using the hook. Okay, so let's go back to the home screen. And first, I'm actually going to change this to a normal function. So I'm going to do export default and say function. Let's get rid of this navigation too. I don't need that. And brackets. Okay. And then I want to return this here. And up here, I want to actually use our hook. So constant, let's call it orientation. It really is more than that, but we'll just say orientation equals use orientation. So we need to go back to the hook and import use effect here. Okay, so back to the home screen. So use orientation. And the first thing I want to use it for is the width of these buttons. So before we were just saying width divided by 3, but now we're just going to do orientation dot width divided by 3, which is actually the same thing. But since we already have the width defined in the hook, we might as well use it here. Okay, so save, reload. Okay, I think we're good. So let's rotate the screen. And it says can't find variable onChange. So let's go back to this. And I forgot to capitalize the onChange here. Okay, But actually that was good to see because you saw when we tried to rotate the screen, then the component was actually dismounted, which invoked this return statement here. So that's why we got that error on this line here. So let's reload. Now let's rotate. Let's put in a bracket here. Okay, so now you can see that it is taking up 1/3 of the space here. So this is actually pretty important because it tells you to only run this one time. So that's why we were getting that error when it rotates. One reason was because this handler was not defined correctly, and the other reason is because we were calling this use effect multiple times, and this ensures that it's only called one time. And now you can see that the buttons are always 1/3 of the screen, no matter what orientation you are in. Okay? So let's go back to the home screen again. And you see we have our orientation.width divided by 3 here. So let's say I want to have the buttons be vertical in landscape and horizontal in portrait. And you'll see why I want to do that later, but for now, I'm going to have that be the case. So I'm going to create a new prop and I'm going to put it inside of the button container here. So I'm going to say is portrait equals that orientation. So orientation dot width, or sorry, not orientation dot width, orientation dot is portrait. Okay, because we have that defined here. And you'll see that we have width, height, and other stuff here too. Okay, so let's save. And let's log that now. So console.log orientation, just to see what that is. And you can see here for the return object for our use orientation, we have font scale, height, width, scale, and we added the is portrait here too. Okay, so it all creates one object by doing it this way. So that's why we could do orientation.width here. Okay, we can get rid of that. So we have orientation.isPortrait, and we're passing that into the button container. So let's go to the button. We have flex direction row here. So instead of just saying row, I'm going to pass in the props. And again, this is only something that you can do with styled components. It's a little bit harder to do this kind of stuff with the normal style sheet, but you can do it. But I'm going to focus on the style components in this video because I love style components. So we have props. If props is portrait, remember to spell this right, then row, else, so it's a ternary operation, do column. And this has to be in quotes here. So save, let's rotate, and now you can see we have column here. So already our app is showing a different layout for landscape and portrait. Okay, so you can also see that the buttons are aligned left here, but I want them in the center. So doing that is pretty easy with style components. You can say align items center. And if you're using style sheets, you would have align items like this, I think. Yeah. Okay, so align items dot center. So now you can see we have center buttons in both portrait and landscape mode. So already looking pretty good. Now the biggest UI change I want is I want to have all this stuff here, the title and 2 buttons on the left side here, and I want the list on the right side. So doing that is actually pretty easy. I want to create some new styles because going back to our home screen, as you can see here, we have everything instead of our container here. So we have title, button container, and flat list. So this is all kind of in a column here. But I want to group the title and the 2 buttons together because I want those to all be in one place on the left here. So I'm going to create a new component around the title and the button container. So let's go to the wrapper class here, or the style here. And I will create a new style component here, and I will call it export constant. I'll call it header container because this is kind of like a header part, I guess. header container equals styled dot view. And inside of here, I want the flex direction to be a column because we have this and we have this. So it'll be flex direction column. And first we'll see how this looks. So I'll save this, and then back in our home, I want to wrap that around our title and our button container. So header container wrapped around here. Okay, and I need to import that from our wrapper. So header container. Okay, so as you can see, nothing has really changed visually, but you'll see why I did that in a bit. So now I want to create a styling for our container here. So we have our container style here, and I'm going to rename this to, let's do home container, just to be consistent with the naming here. So home container, home container, home container. Okay, and I missed something. Oh, I forgot to save it. So let's save. There we go. Now I want to add some flex direction to this. So let's go up here and I want to say flex. Oops, flex direction. And this will be based on the props.isPortrait. So I'm going to say $ props.isPortrait. So we still need to pass that in here too, but for now we'll do portrait column because this and the list is all in a column. So column, else row. Save. And now you can see that this is a row because isPortrait is false. Okay, so let's go back to the home screen and pass in our isPortrait equals orientation.isPortrait. Okay, so now you see we have a column here for portrait, and in landscape, we have this part here and this part here. So we are very close to how I want this to look. So let's go back. And now in the header container, let's say I want this to take up 50% of the screen. So half this, half the list. That's pretty easy. We'll pass in the isPortrait here too. And now I want to set the width of this to be half of the screen in landscape mode. So I can say width, and we can pass in our props here again. So props dot is portrait. And if it's portrait mode, it could just take up the entire width of the screen. That's not a big deal. Like this here. So I can say 100%. Else I will say 50%. And I think I'm missing something here. Oh yeah. Okay. Let's go back to home. So save, and now you can see it looks the same in portrait. Let's go to landscape mode, and now you can see 50%. We have our list here working the same as before. Okay, so that looks a lot better. Now the rest will just be making it look a little bit prettier. So in landscape mode, I want to add a divider here too, but only in landscape mode. So down here, between the flat list and the header container, I want to create a divider. So creating a divider is just a view that has some width or height only. So down here, I want to create some brackets because I want to have a condition for the component. I want to say if we are not in portrait mode, it's portrait, then I want to show a view. And then instead of creating a style component for the view, I'm kind of lazy right now and I want to save time by just creating the style here. So I'll create the view with a style prop, and I'm going to say background color for this will be white. And I want the height to be the entire height of the screen here. So I want the height to be 100%. And for the width, 1 for now. So width could be 1. Terminate our component here. Then I want to say if it's not portrait mode, or sorry, if it's not landscape mode, then I would just have null here. So we'll just not show anything. Okay, and we have an error. I need to import the view for React Native. So we'll do view. And now you can see for landscape, we have the divider. For portrait, no divider. And as you can see here, the divider really doesn't look quite right because it has a margin here. And that is because our home container has a margin. So the entire container has a margin at the top. So I want to get rid of this margin. Let's see how this looks. So the divider is there. This doesn't look quite right. So let's just add some margin here too. So I want to say margin top, and let's add maybe like 30, I don't know, 36 px. See how this looks. Okay, that looks a lot better. Try 40. Yeah, that's fine. So 40, but keep in mind this margin will show on the portrait mode too. So let's see how that looks there. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah. Oh, one more thing. If you want to see how to do this without style components, then like for example, in the view here, you could say if orientation dot is portrait, then you could say 1 or 2. So if you want to style your components based on a field without style components, then you need to do inline styles. That's why I don't really like inline styles in general. Style components is definitely a very nice tool to have in your toolbox. So one more thing before I finish, I wanted to import the use orientation into the list item here. Where's it at? The list item. I want to change this to a function. So export function and return the list item container. So return. And I want to import the constant orientation equals use orientation. And I want to make the list size a little bit bigger in portrait mode. So let's pass in the is portrait. You can call this whatever you want to, but I'm just naming it is portrait in all of the style components. So is portrait equals orientation dot is portrait. And then inside of the list item text component here, I want the font size to be based on the is portrait flag. So props and then props dot is portrait. If it is portrait, I want to have the font be bigger, like 30 px, I guess. And then for landscape, let's make it smaller, maybe 22 px like it was before. Save. Now you can see the text is bigger now, and then it's smaller in landscape mode. Okay, and if you're not sure that it's bigger, let's make it really big. Let's do 40, and that should be px. And I can see the text is really big in portrait and 22 in landscape. So you can see how easy it is to create very responsive layouts if you use a combination of hooks and style components. If you want to see more of these types of videos where I show how to create different responsive layouts, let me know, leave a comment, message me on Facebook, etc. So stay tuned for the next video and happy coding. Bye.